in this kind of a fashion. And I just want to give a bit of an introduction to say that terms like Buddham Sharanam Gacchami is known to everybody. And we all know the bare bones of the story that Siddharth left the home in the middle of the night. But how many people have really gone into the details of what happened to the home that he left behind? All the details of Buddha's life have been put in through storytelling, through sculpture. But what about Yashodhara? And the bold step that Sunita has taken is to not only tell the story through imagination, because we have very little external evidence, and whatever external evidence is available, but also to tell the story in the voice of Yashodhara. Now, we all know that's a tremendously difficult thing to do, to imagine a dialogue, imagine inner thoughts of a character like Yashodhara, and the very awkward situation where the husband has left the home without even telling you, and he's become a celebrity, of course, and everybody knows him. And then he comes back to the palace after some years, and there is a discussion between the two. So we look into some of those details, but I want to make a general point for people here to consider that I came across a book written in America which was called Married to Greatness. And it pretty much showed that the wives of celebrities have a really rough time. And nobody really cares that they're having a rough time in whatever way. So this is one more example of what kind of life did Yashodhara lead, and in what manner did she find the energy, the resources, the intellectual capability to create an aura of dignity and position for herself. So I want to begin by asking Sunita, what was your motivation? I'm reading Meanings, of course, but what was your motivation for writing this story?
First of all, I must thank Tanja and Mala more because she wrote the foreword for the book. So, so our relationship with this book is like together. It's not just me. I would say Mala is also a part of the book. You can't, run away from that, Mala. So let's admit it. Now, the inspiration of this book, I can't really pinpoint. But since I was in school, maybe I was 12 or something, this particular thing used to bother me, that why did Buddha leave his sleeping wife and a newborn baby? Why did he leave? How could he do that? And why is it that we have deified him and we take him to be a god, and he's the one who becomes important. What happens to the wife? So that, can you imagine at the age of 12, that was bothering me. And so the result was that I did a lot of reading about Buddha. So much so that I even went on the Buddha's pilgrimage. I visited the places where he was born, where he gave his sermons, where he got enlightenment, and so on and so forth. And nowhere, and I would visit bookstores, because being a writer, you tend to visit bookstores. So I could never see a single book that talked about the wife. Son was mentioned here and there because he followed his father, but nobody ever mentioned the wife. She was kind of in the shadows, and which was something I could not accept maybe as a woman, maybe as a woman who's a very strong-headed person herself. So I could not really accept the fact that she would be doing, she wouldn't have done anything. So how it helped me was that because I was looking for Buddha and the stories and his life so much, that I discovered a few papers, not from Indian writers, not from Indian scholars, but American. And there I discovered that Yashodhara had also attained enlightenment, that she also attained nirvana. So these were the bare pieces, little bits and pieces of information that I gleaned from certain research papers, and that became the foundation of the idea behind writing the book. So it was that little bits and snatches, literally, as to about her interaction with the lady monks, and how the Buddha's mother became a monk first, and so on. But all that stuff became, you can say, the starting point of getting this idea. But writing in first person was something, it never struck me initially. It was something that I thought that I'll write a story. First of all, it was, I'll write Buddha's story but give more importance to Yashoda, but it was not happening. It was not working out. It was not gelling, as we use the word. It was just not gelling. Because if I'm talking of Yashoda, I have to kind of not talk about Buddha so much, So all that, there was a lot of confusion here, till suddenly I realized that, there were certain dreams that I used to have, and they used to have a lot of these kind of, because when you're doing work on a subject and when you're immersed in it, you tend to get dreams about it. So that happens. So those dreams, somehow I interpreted those dreams as though they were telling me that these dreams are coming, giving me direction towards Yashodhara, pushing me towards Yashodhara. And it was just a click. It was literally like a click. So everything kind of fell into place, and the story started taking form. So that's how the first person thing, happened.
Well, talking of dreams, I think we should go to slide number 1, which is, these are those famous cave paintings in Ajanta.
There's light coming off.
Maybe we can adjust them, but it's very interesting that Buddha's birth is also predicted through a dream that comes to Queen Maya, and it's a 6-tusker elephant that predicts that the child to be born will be an extraordinary child and has a public role to play. And so this pre-story of Buddha, as you rightly said, that one gets surrounded by ideas and dreams, and our mythology and our legends are full of these dreams, which are prophecies also. So that's one slide, the description of Buddha's birth. So in a way, he's marked to be a person who will not be a householder. But of course, Yashodhara doesn't know that. And they're young playmates, and then later on they become married, and then they have a child, and then one night, without even telling her or even going into the room, he just leaves. That we'll come to that in a little while. The second slide, also from Ajanta, not that one. This is the palace of Kapilavastu. And Sunita sent this to me just to give us an idea of the kind of opulence and splendor within which people were living. And Buddha was brought, or rather Siddhartha, as he was known till he attained the enlightenment, Siddhartha was brought up in this kind of a palace.
Yeah.
So where did the spiritual inspirations come from?
Actually, the reason why this opulence was given to Siddhartha was that, as Mala said, when Siddhartha was born, the earlier picture was the time, it depicts the dream that Maya has, where she feels that a 6-tusked elephant enters her body. She feels a touch, and after that, when she wakes up in the morning, the royal priests and all, they declare that this is a good omen. It means that she's pregnant and she's going to give birth to a prince who's going to rule the world. So that was the kind of interpretation they had before he was born. And this comes much later. Then he was born, and once he was born, the Pandits who came, when they made the horoscope, they felt that they said the same thing, that he's going to rule the world, but they also said that if he gets out of this environment, then he will become he will go into the other extreme. He will rule the world still, but he'll become a spiritual leader. So, but that was something which the father didn't like very much, because it's like he wanted his son, of course, he wanted an heir to the throne, so he wanted Siddhartha to rule the country. But the very fact that he would rule the world was still kind of a happy thought as far as the father was concerned. So what he did was that he wanted to save Siddhartha from all the pain, because he felt that why should a prince get out of the palace at all? Only if the prince is suffering something, if there's a pain, if there's some discomfort, some kind of, trouble, that's why a person would leave. So he created an environment that would not have any grief, any suffering, any pain. So he made separate palaces for different seasons for Siddhartha, and there was a ban on old people or sick people to be seen, in the palace grounds. Even the trees were trimmed so that there wouldn't be any old leaves or dying flowers. So they took, the parents took that kind of care so that Siddhartha is not exposed to any of these things which might make him think that, oh, let me find out more about this. But as you know, destiny has its own way of handling situations. So this was, the opulence that was given to Siddhartha all his life, and from where he escaped.
So if we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is clearly not from India. It's possibly from Thailand. So the influence of Buddhism was very great in many East Asian countries. And unlike the portrayal of Buddha, which you can find everywhere and anywhere, Sunita and I talked on this on the phone. I said, where are the portrayals of Yashodhara? And she said, there aren't. I looked all over the place. And then I found this on the net and I shared it with her, and she said, but it's not Indian. I said, so look at the contrast, that here is a prince to whom everything is created a kind of way that he does not encounter so-called adverse situations even in his growing up experience. And here is the woman who's his playmate and then becomes his wife, who's not portrayed anywhere. So would you like to comment on this singular portrait of Yashodhara that we were able to find?
I would say actually that I'm happy that at least in some country, somewhere in the world, she was recognized, because you don't get to see Yashodhara in India. I have not been able to find any visuals at all for Yashodhara. So it makes me happy that it doesn't matter. At least, somebody somewhere recognizes her.
Well, the colors
That
we have
shows
got,
royalty.
yeah, could be the royal color. It's of course a very stylized painting, but this also opens into the larger question, which we won't go into in detail. But I just want to mention that this is again a common story. We know nothing about Radha's childhood. We know very little about Sita's childhood. So it is the fate of the women to be left out of the story, except for the segment that relates them to the important and significant male character in their lives. So Yashodhara also we have to be content that Sunita has told us this story, where maybe someday someone is going to paint a series of canvases on Yashodhara, because that is now happening in the world of art. That just as books are being written about the silenced women, there are artists who are picking up the subject and developing it into another kind of an art form. Let's go to the next slide. See, so this is, and I'd like Sunita to comment on this in some detail, because this is an oft repeated image of when Siddhartha leaves the palace. And from what I can make out, he cuts off his hair. And there are other details of, there's none of that opulence anywhere around. And you can see that there is a figure supplicating before him with a few things and a horse. And that's all that he perhaps leaves with. But over to you for elaborating.
This is the point which triggered me also. So this is the point where a baby is born called Rahul, and the father, Siddhartha, he just peeps into the room, sees the sleeping mother and the baby, and he just walks away. And he walks away, walks out of the palace, and takes Channa, this guy, his not really servant but Sais. And
came back to the palace.
no,
He knew that
No, he was, you see, the story is, I'll just go a little back. What happens is Yashoda gets married to Siddharth, and they were playmates, and they were kind of distinctly related to, and they would play together, and they would always be in the palace, and Yashoda never wondered why, the kids of the palace are not going out. But it so happened that they get married, and after marriage she realizes, this is what the story is, what she realizes is that Siddharth has not been exposed to the outside world at all, which is a kind of a horrifying thing for her, because she comes from a family where they would play with mud, they would, climb trees and so on and so forth. It was a very normal life, and she finds this to be something, really bizarre. So she finds out from her in-laws that this was the prophecy, that if he stepped out, if he went out, then he would take sannyas. So, but she felt that, this was something, if he had to do something, then he should be allowed to do that. I mean, like, who are we to stop anything at all from happening? So, but she does it in a different way. She talks to him, she starts talking to him about life, her life, how she lived, her childhood, and makes Siddharth, get interested in the world around, outside of the palace too. So that, when he gets interested, then he would tell his parents and he would say that, okay, I'd like to step out. Otherwise, he was not allowed. So that is how it happened. So they both were evolving together, and he started getting to know things as to what is happening outside. And that's when he saw those, he sees a sick man, he sees a dead body, and he sees an old man, and then he sees a mendicant. That happens after marriage. But so all that time, his brain has already started getting into these questions as to why is one sick, why does one get old. He gets worried that, oh my God, I'm going to get old, my parents are going to get old. When he sees a sick person, he's worried that, his wife is pregnant, he feels that she's sick. So these kind of things, which are actually very normal for us, but to him they were like strange, bizarre, and that was what Yashoda helped in, helped him to get over and to get to understand what normalcy is, because he was leading an abnormal life. So since he was going through all that, and also he felt that what is the point, now my child is born, it's another, you can say attachment that is going to be forming. So he decides to leave. He wants to cut off from the family at that point, and he leaves, and he gets out of the palace, gets out of the city itself, the kingdom itself, and goes close to a river, and then he cuts his hair, and there's a mendicant there, he just exchanges clothes, he gives his royal clothes to that guy, and he tells this size, you take the horse back and tell my father that I've gone to seek what he was wanting me not to find, so now I've gone to find that, and tell my wife that once I find that, I'll come back. So that is the story behind this scene. No, playing in the palace grounds. They were playing in the palace grounds. It was very cushioned, very, royalty. So it's like, if they're climbing the trees, they bring the fruits, there'll be like 10 servants rushing, taking the fruits, washing, cutting them and serving them. So he was not really going through the real life, And everything was manicured, the plants were manicured, the grass was cut. So it was not something that, he experienced at all.
मैंने सुना है कि उनके दसों 10 चक्र होते या तो इनके 10 चक्र होते हैं यहाँ पे, या तो राजा चक्रवर्ती सम्राट बनते हैं या फिर लेखन।
हाँ, वही हुआ था ना, तो उसी वजह से तो उनको imprison कर दिया था पैलेस में।
Shall we go ahead with the story, and then we can come take all the questions if that's okay? Because I think the way you're putting it is that he was destined to leave, and that's why we started with the Maya's dream part of it. So of course we know the story of how he left and the enlightenment, etc. In fact, we can perhaps have the next slide, which is very stereotype. It's a small one. There's so many images of Buddha under the Bodhi tree that just picked up less than stock image, shall I say. It's a very stylized kind of a picture, but that's just the context. Now, what happens in the palace, and I'd like Sunita to read something from her book at this stage, that she is now a single mother. I don't know.
Bottom right hand. The blue dot. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks. So it's not that I want to talk about the picture, but I'm trying to put the context that this is what's happening to the husband, what's happening to the wife. So Yashodhara is bringing up the child like a single parent. Remember, Sita brought up her twins as a single parent. So there are sort of repetitions of this silencing of the woman and the celebration that happens of the husband. Now, what I want to ask Sunita to elaborate on is that in those 7 years, the child is growing and asking questions. And Rahul also asks questions as to where is my father? What does he do? Why is he not here? Because in the normal course of things, that is how children would be. And then Yashodhara has to find ways and means of explaining that, and yet holding firmly on to her dignity, not allowing the absent father, to be belittled in any kind of a way. And then 7 years after he achieves enlightenment, as far as I can recall, he comes back to the palace. That's an amazing moment that you've captured. And no longer Siddhartha, the husband, he's Buddha the enlightened, and an entourage of people with him. And Yashodhara decides that she will not go out of her way to meet him. But she is a person who has understood the state of her living the way she is. She has also empathized with Buddha's destiny, and she does not want any recrimination to slip out in that conversation. What I really enjoyed among many things in the book was that conversation between Buddha and Yashodhara that is supposed to take place in the privacy, whatever little privacy is allowed to them.
This is going to be slightly long now. Should I start from the beginning?
Whatever.
I'll start from the beginning. The chapter is called Homecoming because this is when Siddhartha becomes the Buddha and visits his parents' his home for the first time, which is very, very important for the entire kingdom. So there was a gentle knock at the door. I took a deep breath and turned my head towards the door that I once hated so much.
Sorry, what page is it?
This is 112.
Anybody wants to go?
Blessings, Yashu, Siddhartha said in a soft, melodious voice. Or maybe it was my imagination that made his words sound like music to my ears. You see, she still loved him. There was a majesty about him now, not the kingly majesty, but a holy one. Tall and graceful, with his shoulders pulled back like a well-trained archer, and eyes that seemed like pools of eternity, capable of drowning the entire world, Siddhartha looked more beautiful than ever today. I looked at him, searching to find who he was that stood there before me. Images of the past 20 years of the restless, tormented, sensual lover and husband clashed with this new, calm person with a steady gaze. The awakened one, the Buddha. It was like standing in a dense forest of very tall trees with the sun shining above, but the wind blowing and the trees swaying to create a psychedelic atmosphere of a play of light and shade. It was an unearthly, timeless moment. As we looked at each other after a separation of 7 years, Siddhartha's eyes welled up, and a teardrop escaped from the corner of his left eye. That was the only emotion I saw, and that too was not really an emotion so much as a result of an emotion. It revealed his understanding of the depth of my emotions. Other than that, his eyes, his face, his entire demeanor exuded unwavering serenity and compassion. My Siddhartha, who was such a gentle human, had become more ardently so. His immensity seemed uncontainable now. In that shared moment of ours, I could see him reading me as I read him. That was our special bond, a bond of shared lifetimes. We could read each other like open books, and suddenly it struck me that maybe that's why he didn't want me to see him leaving. He couldn't have left then. And that's true. It was, if their eyes had met, then he couldn't have. And that's what he said too. Today, as I saw him, I also saw us being seen by each other. It was like being an observer and the observed at the same time, a liberating feeling indeed. What brought you back? I asked, before I could stop myself. And well, my forthrightness had not diminished over the years, as a slight smile on Siddharth's face indicated. I had promised you through Channa that I would come after I had found my answers. I had to come, at least once. King Shuddhodhan also doesn't have much time left. I was a bit thrown off by that statement, as my father-in-law seemed in perfect health to me. I came to make amends to you, and through you, to the others. I am profoundly sorry for the pain I caused you, Yasho. My astonishment in hearing this overlapped with an immense wave of relief and gratitude. It was very hard for me to leave you and our son that night, because I was too attached at that time to you and our baby. And like all attachments, it was selfish. I had to let go of that kind of love if I was ever going to find the answers I was looking for. I wanted to learn the kind of love that went beyond individuals, the kind that was beyond suffering. You wanted the answer to suffering, but caused suffering to all of us in order to find it. I couldn't resist adding. He smiled his old indulgent smile and continued, After our son was born, I came to see the two of you in your room. You seemed very tired and I didn't want to disturb you. I wanted to hold our son in our arms, but knew it would wake you. I also knew that I would lose the courage I needed to leave if you woke up and we saw each other. At that point, a word flashed across my mind, Rahul, meaning obstacle. Are you saying that you thought of his name even before the royal priest drew up his horoscope? I was absolutely astounded. Yes, I did. His birth created an obstacle. At that time, both of you were obstacles. Had I lingered, I would never have achieved what I knew needed to be achieved. And so I left. I had to sever the bonds that caused suffering to me if answers were ever to be found.
Wonderful. That's really beautiful writing. And this is where the imagination of the creative writer comes forward. So let's turn to another very moving part of the book, and that is Rahul's questioning. Again, it's something that Sunita has created in the language. And he asks his mother that what is my inheritance? And the mother says, that is a question you have to ask your father. So when the father comes, Rahul goes to the father and says, what is my inheritance? And the Buddha holds out an empty bowl and says, this is your inheritance. And Rahul follows his father and becomes a monk. So Yashodhara loses yet another loved person in the family. Your comments.
You see, Yashodhara was, initially she was obviously heartbroken and all the things that go with when your husband leaves you. But she, tried to get over it for the sake of raising her son in the right manner. So, when the son turned 2 and once he was playing with the kids of the servants, the royal servants, he came home, he came to his palace feeling, looking very sad. And he asked his mother, where is my Baba? Everyone has, parents, they, when they have to learn something, they go to their Baba. Where is my Baba? When is he coming? People are saying he's gone. So Yashoda at that point of time understands that, since Siddharth is not around, she has to function as both the parents, and it's a tough call for any single parent. And she tells him that, there's so much of suffering, there is so much, people are in so much pain, they are in so much trouble. So Baba, was hurt by all that, and he was very sensitive, he was hurt. So he has gone to find a cure for all that. So the son, said that, he could have asked Dada, because Dada is the king and he helped, he would have helped Baba also. So then Yashodhara says that, well, we've got a huge kingdom and Dada is busy handling the kingdom. So they divided the roles, and it's like, when you were making a clay horse with your Nana, you made the horse and, Nana made the tail. So both of you together made the horse. So this is something like that, So that's how the Baba has gone for finding the cure. So once he finds, so when will he come back? Once he finds the cure, he will be coming back. So this is how the whole thing was there in young Rahul's head, that my father has gone out for work. So that kind of, in his head, he knew that the father is there, but is not available because he's gone out for some very important work. So it was something very, huge that Yashodhara could do, considering the pain that she was undergoing, because she didn't know that he was going to come back. There was a possibility that he wouldn't have come back. So that is where, and the inheritance part also, she knew that, again, because she had seen it in Siddharth, that the destiny could not be changed, however hard, Siddharth's father Shuddhodhan tried. So she felt that, she has no business to stop her son from, in case, if he wants to go. So in her heart, she knew that there is a possibility that, my son might go, and she was prepared for that.
So we come to the next phase of Yashodhara's life, which again is a reinvention in the new circumstances in which she finds herself. And we can go to the next slide. So
this was Rahul going to the father.
The idea was that if the son could follow the father, if he had so many thousands of people who believed in the path of the Buddha, why can't I? And it was also Buddha's foster mother, Mahaprajapati, who also believed in that. So they tried to gain entry into the Buddhist monk order and were not encouraged to do so because they were women. So the story goes that Yashodhara and Mahaprajapati, they opened their own sangha and admitted women. And for a long time, they waited for the men to realize that the universe is created by both men and women. And the sangha for the women grew independently. Now, the interesting thing in literary history is that some of the earliest writing that we get from women, 5th century BC, is the Therigatha, which literally translated means the writings of the elder nuns. So the women sangha obviously managed to grow quite successfully, and it also shows the dignity of Yashodhara, the dignity of the foster mother, and the hundreds of women who also joined the sangha and said, we won't take no for an answer, we can open our own, because if the idea is to alleviate the suffering of the human beings, then women can do it as much as men can. And ultimately Buddha recognized that, and women were admitted to monkhood. So this is again a slide that you sent me, so you may want to talk about it.
This is, the women entered Buddha's sangha because of Buddha's mother, Mahaprajapati. Because after Shuddhodhan passed away, Buddha's father passed away, initially when Shuddhodhan was not keeping too well, Mahaprajapati was helping her husband also. But then eventually when he passed away, then the kingdom went to the nephew, Shuddhodhan's brother's son. Then Mahaprajapati was she had more free time, and she decided one day that, I would rather follow my son, I would join the sangha of my son. But of course, when Buddha was there for his father's death, she broached the topic and he refused. He said, it's very difficult for you, because at that point of time, probably he behaved like a son and said, it's very difficult, because you've got to walk and barefoot and so on and so forth, eat once and so on. So he refused. But Mahaprajapati was, adamant that she would do it, and if the son doesn't agree, then she would set up her own business. Literally, it was like that. So that's how. And then, of course, it took a while for Buddha to get down to okaying the whole thing, and they made a separate set of rules for women monks and so on and so forth, and a special sangha was established for the women monks under Buddha. But before that, as Mala said, what happened was that Mahaprajapati was a very compassionate lady, and there would be a kind of a parallel court that she held, where women from the villages would come and with their problems, problems at home, money problems, and all kinds of problems, and the queen would just listen to them. Now, what was required was listening, because women, the problem with women at that time and even now, I'm sure, it is that you don't get heard. So this was what Mahaprajapati did, that she would hear them out, and they would be able to vent, they would be able to talk, and then the solution would come, by just talking amongst themselves. It was something like that. It was not that she was offering any kind of actual help, but it was like resolving their problems by just talking talking out those problems. And that's where even Yashoda was helped, because she felt when her husband left that she was probably the only one who was suffering the most. Like her mother also said, that if you don't get out and see other people, you feel that your sadness is probably the worst. But if you just look around, you'll find many more people who are probably in a worse situation than you. So this is what happens. So that is how the Sangha developed in the palace itself, and Yashodhara continued even after Mahaprajapati left and followed Buddha. Yashodhara actually did not follow her husband. She maintained her Sangha at home, because she was walking a similar path which was parallel to her husband, but she was not walking behind him. She had made her own path. She had carved her own path. And that is what. So in the book also I've mentioned that when Buddha meets her, he tells her that, I found Buddha first and then I developed the Sangha. But what you have done is you have found the Sangha first and then you developed the Buddha. So they were following the same path, but they were kind of parallel. And she wanted it to be so.
So as the story of Yashodhara ends, she has also attained enlightenment in her own way.
She attains enlightenment at around the same time when Buddha does under a Bodhi tree. And that's what she says also, that you had to step out of the palace to find what I found while staying inside the palace. So it was, the same time, but the Mahaparinirvana, that she attains 2 years before
Buddha. Yeah, so let me just ask the last question and then we'll open it up. And it's a very brief question. And that relates to your dedication that you've given in the book. Your dedication reads, I would like to dedicate this story to married women all across the globe. Why?
It's obvious, isn't it? I think Yashodhara was like any other married woman, giving more space to her husband's needs and desires and profession and whatever else. And so she was, it was not that she was suppressed, but it was something, she did of her own. She kept quiet. It's like, we see it all the time. It's like when husband and wife both are working, it's invariably importance is given to husband's work. It happens. So I felt that this is something which happens in every married woman's life when she comes to, and very many times in her life she would be at a point where she would have to sacrifice a little. She would probably have to stay back because of the children, because husband will not stay back. There are lots of things. She probably can't go somewhere because she can't leave the children behind. So many tiny little things that happen in a married woman's life. I felt that this is something which, resonates. The story of Yashodhara resonates, with those women, and how married women, we find strength in the smallest of things, We create strength, we find strength, we develop strength, So that is why I dedicated this book to all the married women.
Thank you. That's a lovely conversation. I learnt a lot, and it's open to any questions you'd like to address, Sunita. I'll stay out of it.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to point out something that it's not as though we didn't have Rishikas in the Vedic times, plenty of women, and some of them known, some of them just in the background. For example, there was this Rishika.
Lopamudra. There's so
She
many.
was,
There were
yes.
a lot. Yeah.
So they didn't start an organization, but they were absolutely enlightened in their own right. And Ba Kamreet, this lady, the Rishika, she is the daughter of this Rishi, and she has written a beautiful sukta about enlightenment, and she says, "I am everything." And so it's not as though they started a sangha or something like. It's been there, in our Vedic times.
Yes.
So many of them.
This was the need of the hour. You see, what happens is it's everything dependent on the situation. Now, this was the need of the hour. It was not that Yashodhara created a sangha. She was only trying to get over the hurt that
Yeah.
she had. She did not actually deliberately or by any design create it. She did not create any sangha. It was she kind of merged with the sangha that her mother-in-law was kind of holding, and she realized that it is helping, and so she discovered, through that, by interacting with other women, by understanding them, and she realized that she could understand their pain. She could understand, if a woman is going through an abusive relationship, she could understand so many things. And that is how, it helped her. It helped her heal by healing other people. It was a process of healing where everyone was healing everyone else. That is why. She never set out to make a sangha. And yes, you're right. In fact, I have mentioned in the book that, her strength comes from her mother and her grandmother. This is something probably a reflection of my own life, because that's where I have always drawn my strength from my mother and from my grandmother. So this is what I have also written, that the grandmother tells her that about the various Rishikas. So it's nothing new. She says that, and that's how she was raised, to be a strong person, a strong woman, a person who questions. She was raised as a girl who should question things and not accept them blindly. So her upbringing was such. But unfortunately, she married into a family where questioning was not really allowed. The husband was not even allowed to get out of the house. You see this, a literal change from where she was, from where she had come to where she landed. So she had to work through all that.
You find out that I've read a little bit only. I'm motivated by your book. It's a beautiful book, your book. One has to read it at one go. Now, I found that her pain, whatever little I've read, I haven't read a lot of it, when she's narrating this to the Sakhi, I don't know, he addresses it to a friend, where she says that if he had told me, what makes him think I wouldn't have let him go? Because, when people go for war, the wives do understand.
That's the reason.
So I sometimes think that people are too gracious to Lord Buddha. Sorry, because husbands following this, and we daughters always fight about.
You're echoing my sentiments. Go on.
Yeah, because my daughters, they and three of us combined together fight with my husband because he's being drawn into Buddhism and all that. So we say, what kind of person you're going after, who left his wife? And on one hand, he's so sensitive. That chapter you describe about the swan falling and how he's tendering. Now he doesn't have the sensitivity to realize that he needs to talk it out. I'm not saying he was arrogant like Gandhi, who told his wife, okay, I'm becoming a celibate, without even discussing. But he was not arrogant, Lord Buddha. He was sensitive, and he could have talked it out, number one. And number two, maybe because I'm from Sikh religion, Sikhism, and Guru Nanak said you don't have to attain nirvana by going and taking sannyas. As a householder, you can do it. And of course, you have to earn your living. You don't have to go with a begging bowl. because he himself was cultivating. So those are the points which made us not, put him on a very high pedestal as the world does. Of course, Lord Buddha had wonderful qualities, and he spread this, message of love and compassion and all of that. But the way, that's personally my objection. And secondly, why did he have to take the son away also? I don't think the son was drawn towards spiritualism, because he was into learning war and all, because the grandfather wanted to make sure. So I think a 7-year-old child has not to be like bullied into coming with him for following that kind of a path. Those are my objections.
I totally agree with you.
इन्होंने मैथिली, मैं हिंदी में बोलूँ, इन्होंने मैथिली शरण गुप्त को शायद ठीक से उतनी डिटेल में नहीं पढ़ा होगा, क्योंकि मैथिली शरण गुप्त ने यशोधरा के दुख का, पीड़ा का, दर्द का वर्णन किया है, उसके मन को समझा है। और वो ये कहते हैं, मैं पढ़ती हूँ जो उन्होंने लिखा, सखी वे मुझसे कह कर जाते, कहे तो क्या मुझको वे अपनी पथ बाधा ही पाते, मुझको बहुत उन्होंने माना फिर भी क्या पूरा पहचाना, मैंने मुख्य उसी को जाना जो वे मन में लाते, सखी वे मुझसे कह कर जाते। वो ये नहीं कह रही है, वो सिर्फ अपना दुख कह रही है, मुझे पहचाना ही नहीं। जैसे क्षत्राणियाँ अपने राजा को जब वो युद्ध में जाते हैं तो टीका करके भेजती हैं, मैं भी टीका करके भेजती हूँ, उनका जो भी उद्देश्य हो उसकी सफल होने की कामना करती। पर क्या वो मुझे इतना ही समझते थे? मैं उनको प्यार करती थी, उनकी हर इच्छा मैंने कोई टाली ही नहीं कभी भी, तो वो मुझसे क्यों नहीं गए। लेकिन उसके साथ एक और चीज़ मैथिली शरण गुप्त ने कही है, नयन उन्हें है निष्ठुर कहते, आँखें पर इनसे जो आंसू बहते, आँखें तो उनको निष्ठुर कह रही हैं, आँखों से झरझर करके नीर बह रहा है, सदैव हृदय वे कैसे सहते, वो मेरे आंसू देखकर पिघल जाते, वो कैसे सहते, इसीलिए वो चुपके से गए थे, क्योंकि वो उसी के लिए बने थे, उनको वो कार्य करना था, इसलिए नहीं कि वो अपनी पत्नी को प्यार नहीं करते थे। बाकी उसके साथ अब युद्ध में सैनिक जाते हैं, सब जाते हैं, तो वो लड़ाई के लिए जाते हैं, ये थोड़ी है कि अपनी पत्नियों को प्यार नहीं करते, पर वो उनका कर्तव्य है। तो ये कहना कि वो बुद्ध को हम हाईलाइट कर रहे हैं, बुद्ध जैसा एक वो भगवान की तरह से ट्रीट किए जाते, सिर्फ यशोधरा ये कह रही है, सखी वे मुझसे कह के जाते। और राहुल ने कभी भी, राहुल को जो मैंने पढ़ा है, मैंने भी काफ़ी पढ़ा है, बुद्ध ने कभी भी किसी को फोर्स नहीं किया अपना डिसाइपल बनने से। यशोधरा जैसे आपने, मैंने किताब नहीं पढ़ी, आपने बताया, यशोधरा खुद उनको सुन के उनके बारे में फिर मिले भी थे, मॉन्क हो गई थी। इसी तरह से जो राहुल था उसको सब तरह के राजसी सब सिखाए गए, लेकिन खुद उसका मन बुद्ध भगवान के चरणों में चला गया।
ये बात मैंने सारी इस किताब में लिखी है। इसमें ये भी लिखा है कि वो यशोधरा को यही तकलीफ़ होती है कि मुझसे एक बार कह के जाते तो मैं नहीं रोकती, पर वहीं पर इसलिए बुद्ध का वो जवाब भी आता है कि मैं अगर कहता तो फिर मैं रुक जाता, मैं जा नहीं पाता। तो यही ये इसीलिए मैंने ये लिखा जो मैंने पढ़ा। हाँ, तो वो नहीं वो रुक जाते, तो ये बुद्ध ने उनको समझाया है। और राहुल के लिए भी ऐसा ही था कि राहुल जो है खुद जाता है, यशोदा उसको कहती है कि तुम ये सब छोड़ के कैसे रहोगे, तुम तो महल में रहते हो, तुम वहाँ कैसे रह पाओगे। तो छोटा ही होता है, वो कहता है मैं रह लूँगा, कर लूँगा, मैं मेरे पिताजी हैं तो सही। तो पर वो हाँ रोकती नहीं है, और वो उसको ज़बरदस्ती भी नहीं लेके जाते, वो चला जाता है, वो जाने देते हैं। फिर वही बात है ना। Which is also as Yashodhara also feels that at least कुछ तो इसने पेरेंटिंग करी, अपने बेटे को समझाया, नहीं तो he had lost out on the entire parenting exercise.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you first of all, because it's a very dominant subject in my mind and now you brought it back. The thing about Yashodhara is that, after going to Vietnam, after going to Thailand, I could see so many of Buddha everywhere.
and he believes many times there is a form of female and male also. Backside is the female, front is the male. But nowhere is it mentioned about Yashodhara. Despite the fact that she had a son of her own and she was very popular, she got nirvana before him. पर कहीं mention नहीं है, कहीं mention नहीं किया.
उसका reason कुछ और है. The reason is that the form of Buddhism that went out of India was not this Buddhism. It was not the Shakyamuni Buddha's Buddhism. It was the Vajrayana Buddhism that went out. Hence, you don't see, Yashodhara.
Even in India, you don't.
In India, that is what I'm saying. कहीं है ही नहीं.
Banaras वगैरह, where you go, there's nowhere. I mean, you see that Bodhi tree, but nowhere do you see Yashodhara.
सोशल मीडिया होता तो दिखती बहुत.
Yashodhara उसमें भी नहीं दिखती है.
Unfortunately.
I'm saying something that's a little divergent. I study Vedanta. And there we say that as humans we choose our own womb depending on our own vasanas. Because we want a culmination of that vasana and we want to reach a higher order. So we talk about bodhisattvas. These are the previous lives of Buddha, where he came incarnated as different jiva, and did different kinds of work. So we believe in Vedanta that we all have a prarabdha. The prarabdha, which is our past life, including those of our parents and the people we've associated with, and we reach this particular yoni or a desire for a womb that will fulfill these vasanas. So, given all the prarabdha bodhisattvas, finally the Buddha is there. He has realized that was his prarabdha over various yonis. So he has come to that particular time as a jiva. And he, as a jiva, to get there, he has to withdraw. Vairagya is so important to reach that culminating point of Turiya that he had to withdraw. All that, what you've said, certainly is very valid from a woman's point of view, that I would have never kept. Even if he was drawn by me, I would have sought to leave him because he has to fulfill his destiny. That of course is there. But I'm really intrigued, which I've heard for the first time today, that Yashodhara also got nirvana 2 years before Siddhartha.
Yes, this is documented.
Now where is it documented and how does it happen? Because she's there in a milieu where she cannot take vairagya. How do you, I mean, it's
Okay, I'll explain.
really,
No, I'll explain. First of all, prarabdha, what you mentioned. I have talked about prarabdha through many stories in this book where Yashodhara is talking about what she was in the previous life. And Buddha talks about prarabdha all the time, the Jatakas tell us. That everyone is aware of. That this is, he tells a story and says, okay, in that story, this was Anand, this was me, this was my father. Like that he tells stories. So I have included those stories to explain how this whole thing happened. So it is prarabdha only that brings them together and brings them to this point where he has to step out. That is, yes, so that is cleared. Now as when we come to the term vairagya can be, that is detachment if we use the language that we use. Detachment can be while you are inside the world also. So Yashodhara achieves that detachment while she is in the house of.
This story that I.
So that is what. So that is the reason I felt that I had to write, because she did that. She was detached. She was completely detached. Everything literally she shed off everything, all the desires. And there's a progression how it happens slowly, what's through stages, the clothes, the jewels, everything, the food. Slowly it happens, and that is what I have mapped here, in this book. So that Vairagya she achieves while being inside the house. And there is nothing, that says that you have to get out of the house, go to the forest. Then you're not distracted by anything. That is simpler, isn't it? But if you actually stay at home and reach that stage of Vairagya, I think that's far more powerful, and that's very...
Sangha?
Sangha?
Did she have any Sangha that was created?
No. What happened was her mother-in-law was sitting with women, and that formed a Sangha. She was not interested in creating a Sangha. She did not create any. She was living alone. She wanted to be with her own self. So even when the mother-in-law followed the son Buddha, she didn't go. Mother-in-law was not happy also. That main to ja rahi hu, bahu nahi ja rahi, that kind of a thing also was there. But she didn't go. She had achieved what she had wanted to. She was with her own self. She would go and meet. She did. She was living a monk's life. You don't have to live in a sangha to be a monk. You don't have to prove it to anybody. Nirvana is when you leave your body once your work on earth is done. That is nirvana. When you realize your work is done and the soul leaves, and it merges with the super soul. That's what nirvana is. That's what.
In the living.
This title, I have no idea, but this was the first and the only title that I had in my head, because we live in a world of illusions, don't we? And so it's the illusion of the illusions that we have that has to be broken. You have to pierce through all these illusions to get out of this, and be one. So that's how the title came to my head, and it's stuck, and I couldn't change it because it was stuck.
Okay, hi Sunita. It's good that the session is, I have really, got...
Anyway, thanks for coming. She's my friend from school, can you imagine?
No, I had to. Anyway, but a few things which were, in a big doubt in me, I got cleared here. One thing which I never knew, that Yashodhara took monkhood, finally. Because I was not aware of it, I was in doubts. So this is the biggest achievement that I got it here. Secondly, she at that time also followed the woman power. That is the biggest thing, because we talk about woman power now. It is amazing that in that period also, that woman power was found.
It's been there since God knows, since the beginning, Shakti.
Yeah. So the small question is that did Rahul, when he took monkhood, in any point of time followed his mother?
No.
He always followed the father.
He joined the Sangha, but he was distracted, as I mentioned also, he was distracted. So he couldn't become enlightened.
So he never went to his mother?
No, he became a monk. He joined the Sangha. But he never became enlightened.
Morning, I'm Ravindran. Thank you for the good picturization. I just have a little, different look at it. Even, all this, since this is almost 2,600 years back. Okay, yes, that time the mother, the daughter-in-law, they all had the powers, but nothing seems to have translated into the real woman's, participation in communities, except one odd kings and queens and, even today. However, maybe in the last 50 years, even in India, if you look at it today, where every woman is getting educated. In fact, women nowadays have more say in, in anything, whether the marriage matter or anything, and it is happening. So I just want to ask you, even if we had such enlightened persons that time, but nothing has happened to the society. It all remained with their kingdoms And I believe even within 100 years, the teams, they were, they had, difference in opinion. Then they split it into different groups and things like that happen. So can we trust the data what we have or whatever is being taught today? And I'm sure since you have written a book now, it must have been based upon some old research or some facts. Can you just talk a little about the reality? I just want to question as a rationalist thinking, because I'm one person, I must question myself, I must question my dad. So that's my way of thinking. I just want to, because the writers, as a writer, can you just talk about the reliability of the data, what you have? Thank you.
This is an interesting question, but I am such an optimist. I look for good things. I look for good stories. I look for positive, aspects. And because I feel as a writer, we have a lot of responsibility, because what we write goes out into the world and people are reading and following and believing and so on and so forth. So my research has to be impeccable. So in that sense, I hold that responsibility. But how I interpret and where I use my creative freedom is up to me. And that's where the positivity comes. And that's where my own, interest in spirituality comes. And that's where I've done a lot of work on Gita, for instance. A lot of Gita filters into my work. Whatever book of mine you pick up and read, there is that, the essence of Gita runs through, which I realized when I was working on Gita, that at the end of it, whatever religions, whatever books that you read, you follow, you understand, the essence is, somehow distilled into the Gita. So that kind of comes through. So I feel that I have used the references and I used them responsibly, and I have shown the good picture as what I have seen. This is my perspective, because as I say, I like to see good things. But yes, you're right, things have not filtered down. Yes, you're right. There was why? Look at Buddha, when he died, how Buddhism split. I mean, we don't even have to go so far. We don't have to even talk about right now. After Buddha died, there was a fighting amongst two groups, and how they split, and they kept on splitting. It was not that split ended, at a point. They went on. So it's, at the end of it, human nature is what it is. What you can do is just document a few things, analyze a few things, feel happy about a few things, and maybe feel angry at some things. But you can't control anything at all.
For example, one of the stories which the grandmother is telling about Lakshman and Ravan and all, where I thought it was probably your own, rationality or whatever. Because I know when my daughter was trying to teach Ramayana, just tell the story of Ramayana to a 5-year-old, my grandson. And he pinpointed that, no, Ravan was bad, okay, I agree. But it was Lakshman's fault. Why did he have to cut Lakas? Can you mention?
That is what I'm saying. At the end of the day, it's our own perspective.
Yeah, so I thought that was a beautiful...
And that's exactly what Gita says, you can look at a thing from multiple angles, and everyone has a different perspective. The thing remains the same, isn't it?
So I think that was a beautiful perspective. I want to tell you of yours. Because I think this little child says, no, Ravan was okay. But what about Lakshman? Why don't we start from there? Because he was violent and he did something. She's put it very beautifully in the book.
Thank you. We've been talking about what you said, I totally agree with. That it's very easy to give up everything and achieve nirvana, but to stay in your own circumstances and to be reaching a detachment stage is a tough path. And women are tough. And while we are talking about, but in this club, we have been having women power, but now I see the men power today. The club is increasing. And I think for a change, next month, the club session should be designed and hosted by the men power in this group. That's called equal. In ours is the opposite. Thank you so much, and I think we can over lunch. I request Sujit to please give us.
Thank you.